Well, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Always great to see some familiar faces and new faces and folks that I can't see. Um, I really miss having this conference in person. I will profess that one day soon, we will all be able to meet again in person. It'll be fun. I'm dialing in from one of my first national in-person professional development conferences, and the energy here is so high. So I do recognize how important it is to be back. So folks here are very happy to be back in person and reconnecting after, for some of them, for the first time in about 3 years. As we kick off this last week of this conference, first, I want to thank all of the organizers and people who are making it happen behind the scenes. Thanks to the CFC National Committee for your commitment to making this happen. Special thanks to you, Robin, for keeping the dream alive. And thanks to you, Curtis, such an inspiration to me. You've always been an inspiration, an exceptional inspiration and champion for this program, and I thank you for that. And Elizabeth, thank you and your team as well. Second, I want to thank my staff. You're all working so tirelessly to make everything happen and be such an enabler for this program. You rarely say no to anything that I ask, and you make, you're just such a phenomenal group. If you do have an occasional no, it's sort of like no, but. For that, I'm grateful. Tony, Gwen, Vanessa, Richard, and Charlize, thank you so much. Finally, to all the presenters, the first week and for this week, thank you. You've all had a chance to hear the basics of the CFC 101, hear more about workplace giving trends, the expansion of the volunteer giving program and how to maximize campaign events, some best practices from award winners and our CFC marketing strategy, and so much, much more. Just a great opportunity to learn and expand your knowledge of the CFC. Well, personally, this is a special time for me. Last year, I got married, and we've been having try to broaden my daughter's experience by giving her projects around the house. She's going to middle school now. It's summer, so we have to keep her engaged, right? So my wife and I both love the movie The Equalizer, the remake with Denzel Washington. But those of you who don't know, he plays a quiet former Marine / retired defense intelligence agent who now has this unassuming life and works at a Home Depot. Since he can't sleep at night, he goes out to the small cafe shop to read at night. Well, it turns out he's challenged himself to reading the top 100 most read books of all time. So my wife and I decided to do the same thing and include my daughter in this challenge. And of course, my daughter hates it, right? Well, one of the books in that list of 100 is by Charles Dickens, The Tale of Two Cities. In that book, there's a quote. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. And it goes on beyond that. That is how I have felt sometimes directing the changes in this program. Thanks to our CFC partners, we were able to convert to a fully online charity and donor experience several years ago. And we were excited with the hope of possibilities. And then we had a government shutdown that lasted over a month. We then regained some momentum the following year, and later the world stopped due to the pandemic. Some of us refocused on
Keith, your mute button.
Keith, you're muted.
Okay. It said somebody muted me, but I won't worry about that. So Regarding some of the best of times, next slide. I want to thank all of you who had a hand in helping to raise over 70 million to help those in need. We couldn't have done it without you. More donors than ever are making pledges online. 95%, in fact, are donating electronically. Donors are using paper pledge forms accounted for 5% of all giving. Most of this may be due to the pandemic and hybrid work, as the majority of people are still spending most of their work week working from home and did not get into offices much last year to get paper forms to complete. OPM will continue to support agencies whose employees are more inclined to use paper pledge forms to donate. Next slide. Retiree giving continues to be the fastest growing population of CFC givers. Retirees now account for 6% of contributions in the CFC program. So it makes sense for us to invest more time and energy in engaging in a robust communication strategy with the agencies devoted to retirement and military pay. And external organizations also who communicate with them is also part of our communication strategy. Next slide. So as we mentioned in the first week of this conference, the ability to offer volunteer opportunities in CFC is huge. And that trend continues to have much upside as it relates to employee engagement. These are a couple of the organizations that are doing a good job, not all, just a snapshot of those that are offering these opportunities. I believe the folks who are engaged in volunteer work can become our biggest givers in the future, if not already. Nearly half of a million volunteer hours have been pledged since the opportunity first began in the CFC. The pandemic certainly impacted it, but as we have turned the corner now, it will be more important for charities to highlight volunteer opportunities through the CFC so donors have an opportunity to participate and grow that part of our campaign. Next slide. Now, let me pivot a little bit to what I would call our more challenging times or trends. Although our donation trends are, as far as total contributions, stabilized a bit during the campaign, as you can see here, we continue to lose donors. With so many people at home during the pandemic, we may have had a captive audience when it came to online CFC events and engagement. But as schools and other things began to open up, people were no longer sitting at their computers and being engaged that way. In-person events are still not heavily attended as people have other things that they can get into. Agencies are not all following the same policies when planning their return to work or to the office. So that could be part of the challenges of the CFC. We also need a better job to do a better job of marketing the mobile giving app. We only saw about $121,000 contributed through the app last year. This also may be a longer-term solution to donors who used to give using paper pledges and attracting new donors or migrating them to the online system. We also need to simplify our text to give process. Next slide. Another set of data we're tracking is donor giving frequency. We really want to have donors for life, from a new employee to retirement. That is the goal. We really need to invest in marketing to the repeat donor. This chart shows that 61% of givers only give in one campaign. More than 120,000 donors gave multiple years since the campaign started before the pandemic years. But as you can see, 8% gave 4 years in a row, 6% gave in 3 consecutive campaigns, 9% in 2 campaigns, and then lapsed. Our data shows that it's cheaper to retain donors than to get new ones. So this is also an opportunity for us. Next slide. As I mentioned before, the retirement segment of the population is the fastest growing segment in the CFC. So that's just to underscore that. Next slide. The role of special solicitations is very interesting. This is interesting, but really not surprising. People are motivated when something happens or when something remains in the news. Leaders can put out a call to action and people respond. This is what happened at the start of the pandemic. That activation seemed to have carried over into the next year's campaign. No one wants a disaster to strike, but it can and will happen. I think that we need to do a better job of being able to respond quicker when these disasters strike. And we need to enable people to support and help as soon as they're interested or they're to give their time and money when it does. So OPM is working hard to respond quicker to enable people to respond and help through the CFC system. Next slide. We're working to let charities know about the CFC and retain charities who are already participating. But let's face it, we need to do a better job of driving down the cost of the program and reducing fees. We've noticed that charities that participate in 3 to 5 consecutive years tend to attract more charities and more donors. We've also noticed that more than half of all charities still leave the program, even though they receive twice in donations as they pay in fees. And we still really don't know why they're lapsed. As we work with our charity recruitment partner, we have to focus on how we can make the business case to both the retention of current charities and bring in new organizations and bringing back organizations that have lapsed from the program. Next slide. OPM has worked really hard to sort of reduce the cost of the campaign since 2017 after recovering its initial investment in the system. But we have to do more. One surprise to me and to other agency leaders is the rising cost of security that has kept costs relatively high. The cost of cybersecurity, cyber threats, cyber hygiene, identity authentication is through the roof, not just for federal agencies, but for the private sector as well. We need to figure out a way to collectively work and pool our resources at the agency level so that we can deal with those costs across agencies and not being program specific. I believe that's the only way we'll really be able to get our arms around it. So OPM is working tirelessly to try to figure out ways to reduce costs, get our appropriators, Congress, to understand what the cost drivers are and seek solutions therein. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the workplace has changed and shifted. One of the things that I've come across recently in a couple of workshops and even here at this particular conference is a lot of discussion around hybrid work and distributed teams. The notion here with this slide is that we have people at one side and then we have technology at the other side, and they don't always meet. But there are factors that can help us understand how we may be able to tackle this problem, where we will have more people working at home than actually working in the office, even though we've returned to work. So I think that will be one of our biggest challenges that we'll have to solve. We'll have to understand what the needs of employees are, their work, their home environment, and what their interests are in order to have engagement. And then how do we fit the CFC opportunity in front of them when a lot of them are at home and some of them are at work? During the pandemic, we were able to more easily see how we should target marketing our campaigns. But now the challenge is some people are in the office, some people are at home. How do we have in-person events that are very attractive to people, but still don't leave the remote worker sort of out there? So I think that is going to be our biggest challenge going forward. The workplace has moved, but it's also come back. But to what degree, we still are trying to figure out. And so agencies across the board are struggling with this problem, not only with their mission critical work, but other OPM programs, whether it's health benefits, insurance, and of course the CFC, in order to be able to make sure that we meet people where they are. So more discussion to come on that trend as well. Next slide. So what is next? Well, I think there's still a lot for us to do. We've certainly had some good times, and we have some challenges also facing us. And in the good time bucket, I would like to say that we have done a pretty good job of moving from a paper-based environment to an online platform that can serve people no matter whether they're at home or in the office. We must continue to innovate, however, whether that's increasing our presence in the mobile giving app, allowing charity events to be able to reach people in the office or at home, and allowing that technology to bridge the gap. We must also continue to drive down costs. As I mentioned earlier, some of the surprising costs that wasn't always evident when we first set up this process was the cost of securing the system, the data, and authenticating. I'll be the first to admit that I believe that that was going to be a cost driver, but certainly not to the degree that it has turned out to be. But we have to protect people's personal identification. We also have to protect the system from any kind of cyber threats. But the cost of doing so has been astronomical. We also need to increase our presence with agency leaders as it relates to employee engagement. Director Ahuja at OPM is very, very keen on this point and is a very huge champion of this program. She has asked many times, what can she do to make sure that leaders are focused on engaging employees, making sure that we have campaign managers that can run the programs at the local level. We're working, of course, internally with our FEB partners and program leaders to make sure that the collaboration is there. That is just one thing that we have to increase our effectiveness in doing. We have to also make sure that the rules that we are working under are still serving us as we go forward. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. We must also make sure that we amplify the messaging of the volunteer opportunities. I think there was a segment a couple of weeks ago that talked about the enhancements that we're making to the system that will allow the volunteer experience to be more robust. As people now move back into the office, I think we will see a spike in people's interest in volunteering that wasn't there during the pandemic. So we really do need to seize on that. and create new tools for marketing the campaign, doing a lot better in our outreach to donors and to charities. Again, not to say that we aren't doing a good job, just what tools can we present that would make that job even better and have better results. And push more information quicker to campaign managers throughout the year, throughout the campaign. Offer up and create dashboards, information opportunities that put information in their hands that can have them maybe redirect some of their strategic efforts out in the field. So those are just some of the things that OPM is doing. We certainly understand that our dollars that get out into the community do a lot of good. We also understand that there's more that we can do. So I appreciate all of you all's efforts and everything that you do, and charities that are interested in this program. We hope that we can present something that serves you well. And thank you very much. Next slide. Now, I know there's a Q&A later today, but if there are any questions that we may be able to answer in the chat or that have come to mind during this presentation, please don't hesitate to send those. Also, you can send those via
Keith, we do have one question in the chat. Now it's Jeff Rich is asking if we know whether the primary location for events will be virtual or will it be on site or vice versa. So campaign managers are sort of looking for some guidance on that. After your hybrid workforce, class last week, any insights on the direction the government's going with that?
I wish I could say that the government moves in lockstep. The truth of the matter is each agency is a fully autonomous unit, and they can make a decision on how much they will be encouraging people to come back into the workforce. So I think the jury is still out. It's July. I know that the Office of the President certainly expects to see a more presence in federal agencies, certainly in Washington, D.C. But I'm still trying to look into the tea leaves and hear what the predominant discussion is. I would say, at least for the moment, we're still in this pattern of people coming back into the office once a week, some twice a week. Now, as a reminder, some federal employees were coming in every day, regardless of the situation in the pandemic, based on the work, the mission, the organization's capability to work remotely. So there have always been federal employees that have been working in the office, but the majority of them have not. So to fairly answer that question is a maybe kind of wait and see. But I would suspect that we would hear more from the White House in the coming weeks as they have more workshops on the return to work and hybrid distributed teams model.
Another question that popped up as you were talking about the repeat donors is a question: have we looked at repeat donors based upon who they're designating to? So are we losing the donor because we've lost the charity?
That is a very good question. And I think we don't have enough information at this time to make a concrete determination on that. Now, I will tell you that someone very smart years ago put the bug in my ear that there's sort of a cascading scenario that they envisioned where if we lose charities, we will lose donors. They did not particularly give me a lot of detail in terms of the percentages or the rate of lapse or loss. But I will say that in a general sense, they may have been correct. So for example, if my favorite charity that I've always given to is not participating in the program, will I give to another charity, or will I stop giving through that program that had included that charity once upon a time? And the answer is, it really depends on what my generosity level is. I may decide to, oh, okay, there's another charity that has a similar mission and look to still participate in the CFC program. Or I could decide that I'm going to give outside of the program. I'm still generous in terms of my philosophy, but I may decide that I'm going to go in a different direction. So we really do not know yet. But I do think there is a correlation between the charities that participate and the givers who see themselves participating in the program. So that's another data point that we need to watch.
And I think one thing that we're looking to do, Lloyd Billy asked the question, is we've just added a new person to our CFC staff, Alicia Kostick. And part of her responsibilities are going to be helping us do some data analytics. So I know she's online, so welcome to the team, Alicia. But let's put this one on your list of questions that we could look at. You know, are we losing donors because we're losing charities, or vice versa? Thanks for helping us determine a little bit more of our performance plan for the next year there, Lloyd. Another question, Keith. Will CFC be issuing charity lists or catalogs this year?
So in the past couple of years, we've always given the campaigns the opportunity to print charity lists. The trend has been away from printing charity lists. One, of course, it reduces the cost of the program, but also because there was limited distributional opportunities. As I said, most agencies' employees were working from home. So I don't think it would have been prudent. Now, for those agencies who had a high in-person presence, it's my understanding that they were still printing some in a limited capacity. But someone can fact check me on that. But I think the trend has been away from printing brochures, but we are certainly open to hearing the business case for printing those. And certainly as we begin to look at the hybrid environment and having more in-person events.
Hello, my name is Mark Babick. I'm on the phone from the Garden Empire Zone.
Hello.
Hello, hi. I've been a key worker for 8 years, and I won't do anything without. I do use the PDF version of the Garden Empire list, and I send that out to my team every week. And I think it's highly effective to use via email to my groups that I work with.
Okay.
I mean, highly effective, highly effective. I get people calling me every week asking me, where's the list? And I send it out, in PDF format.
Sure,
and,
sure.
I consider it highly effective, and it would be abysmal if we don't have at least that version of it.
Sure,
Just
understand.
personal opinion.
That makes sense.
We'll definitely have that version. And we did give all of the zones, the LFCCs and the outreach coordinators, a little bit of a bump in the money they could put toward printing and other direct costs. So I think as people come back to work, there'll be a little bit more printing this year than we did last year. So, but the actual quantity is really going to be in the hands of the LFCC. So, I'm sure that they'll definitely accommodate PDFs as well as some limited number of actual hard copies.
Yeah, I don't need the PDF. I mean, I don't need the hard copy, just the PDF, so they could just Control F and search they love to search their own, charities that they like to look up. And the
You'll
PDF is
have
just
that.
really
Definitely
good.
have that.
Thank you. Oh, just another thing I wanted to mention. You discussed about you talked about charities maybe being delisted, and people seem to run when they are not contribute every year when they donate. If they do lose a local charity, they do go off the deep end. They don't want to donate, and it's just local charities that some people are interested in. Just only a few. I only get a few, but just I had a few people that had local charities that were not on the list from the previous year, and they didn't want to donate, and they just walked away. So local charities have a small impact, I think, on contributions. Just an FYI.
Thank you. I appreciate that input.
Keith, maybe we could squeeze in one last question before we move to the next segment, and that is, are there any plans to track volunteer hours that are actually fulfilled versus what's pledged from Linda Siegel?
Yeah. Well, that has been kicked around just a little bit, Linda. And I think where we have landed that from a resource standpoint is that we have decided at this point not to invest in sort of the compliance part of that program. What we really want to see is more robust volunteer hours, and then maybe reassess from there. I have heard from some charities who have said, hey, I've got this list of people who said they wanted to volunteer for us, but I've not been able to capitalize on those volunteer contributions and talent. So we certainly want to hear when that happens. But I think at this point, we have not decided to invest additional resources in that side of it. We certainly want to invest more resources in enabling people to give and to form groups that might want to go out and volunteer and see what effect that has on the program and to charities. Well, with that, I think that is the last question. Certainly, again, continue to feel free to engage us, sending us emails, or I believe there's a Q&A session later today. Unfortunately, I will not be able to participate, but certainly you'll be in the capable hands of my team, which includes Alicia. Sorry, I did not mention you earlier, as our newest member. So welcome aboard, and we'll be able to hopefully field more questions there.